what I promised that I would do when I ran, and that's what we have done in the first 21 months since I've been in office, emphasizing the importance of this $830 million bond issuance for the infrastructure projects and the maintenance of our city. This funding is needed to maintain the critical public safety and public infrastructure systems that our residents rely upon, and they rely upon those type of investments every day. A significant portion of the funds would go directly towards projects that allow Chicagoans to safely and efficiently move through our city, including bridge repairs, bridge replacements, street resurfacing, sidewalk maintenance and repairs, and street lighting and maintenance and repairs. Every resident of this city deserves to have confidence in the roads, sidewalks, and bridges that they drive and walk on. Every one of our 77 community areas deserves safe and reliable transit systems. This is an investment in safety and efficiency, as well as the equitable development and upkeep of our communities. If we ignore the cost of these maintenance and repair projects, it will only cost us more in the long run. So doing maintenance on a bridge is much more affordable than repairing for a bridge collapse. The bond funds will also go towards the Department of Water Management's water and sewer main upgrades, as well as replacements to lead service lines. This is a critical investment in the safety and health of our residents, especially our most vulnerable, because we all deserve clean water. It is not a matter of if we need to invest in these priorities, but when. This investment comes at a crucial time. For one thing, as we look forward to warmer weather in Chicago, we can expect potholes and challenges on our roads that need to be addressed and addressed immediately. Additionally, this funding comes at a time when there is a great deal of uncertainty around future federal funding to support cities like Chicago. Chicago is not going to sit idly by while critical federal programs that our residents rely upon every single day are threatened. In fact, Chicago, we will lead, as we have. With this bond funding, we will remain a leader here at home and invest in our own infrastructure. I look forward to continued conversations with alders to find solutions for investing in the health and safety of our residents and the vitality of our beloved city. I hope that we can approve this funding and improve the quality of life for residents from every single community area. Thank you for that, and now I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, we'll start with AD. We have time for one question, one follow-up.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Could you or your finance team explain how we got here on the CPS pension issue specifically? The way your finance team talked about it during the budget process, CPS was supposed to use the proceeds of the TIF surplus to make that payment. So how did we end up where we are now?
Jill?
Thank you for the question. I think that's a very good characterization. We've been working with CPS regarding the MEABF payment. Of course, the process started in 2000 when they agreed to pay a portion of the amount that's allocable to their employees. The original agreement was that they would ramp up to paying the full amount allocable to their employees by this year. Last year we lowered that to $175 million instead of $250 million to stabilize the amount that they needed to provide as they move towards a fully elected school board, and ideally to financially disentangling from the city. The conversations this year definitely did revolve around that there would be sufficient TIF surplus funding for CPS to pay for the MEABF payment. The amount of TIF surplus going to CPS was $298 million, plus an additional $13 million to the building fund, which should be sufficient. They did budget some of that for other uses, leaving a balance that's unbudgeted of, I believe it's $139 million. And so, CPS is looking at, what their other options are. They also did not budget for their cost of the collective bargaining agreement, so that's part of the things that they're looking at as well at this point.
So if the city had to draw down on its reserves, how much would it need to draw down, and what impact would that have on the city's general rainy day balance?
So if we don't receive the $175 million from CPS, that is, direct reduction in the revenues that we expected to receive in 2024. We are too early to, have our final numbers for year end and what the full impact of that would be on our balances and our reserves.
Thank you, Jill. And just again to emphasize, CPS, the CEO made a commitment to make that payment.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
When I asked why Alderman Martin's proposed ethics ordinance regulating the power of the law department was sent to rules, I was told from your office, quote, "The proposed ordinance is legally deficient on its face and requires further scrutiny in the Rules Committee where it can be properly vetted and analyzed." The mayor typically controls the Rules Committee. It's meeting today. Why isn't this being considered?
Barry?
Mary Richardson, Laurie Corp Counsel. I appreciate the question because it affords me an opportunity to do a couple of things here. One of which is to give clarity around why one wouldn't, in the normal course, have a proposed ordinance introduced the way it was introduced and simply go before the alders for consideration. As written, the ordinance is inconsistent with the state statute, in violation of an Illinois Supreme Court decision, inconsistent with the municipal code. It is, on its face, simply legally deficient. But there's something more important here. The way that ordinance is structured, it would remove 30 years of guardrails that exist within the system. The protections that are afforded every city worker would be removed. The checks and balances associated with subpoenas and how they're issued would be removed. And it undermines a fundamental principle that is sacrosanct as a lawyer, for all lawyers. The lawyers doing that work are not political animals. They're public servants, and they've been doing that work for decades. The leading lawyer is the managing deputy of litigation. He has 30 years' experience. He analyzes the information that comes over by way of a request for subpoenas to decide whether or not it meets certain evidentiary standards. As a rule, some of it does. On occasion, it does not. It gets sent back to the department. If a prosecution, by way of another example, is sought, what happens now, the way the system is designed, there are checks and balances. It comes over a separate deputy, and so for the record, I don't see those. They are addressed to me, but they immediately go to the deputies to do the work, long-standing public servants. That deputy will analyze it for its prosecutorial evidentiary standards. It either meets it or doesn't. That lawyer would not be able to meet its legal requirements if it moved forward with something that did not meet proper legal standards. Those are just some of the examples. So the ordinance as drafted not only flies in the face of 30 years of precedent, it's just legally deficient on its face. As a rule, I would never have had this conversation publicly. I find it distasteful. I find that there's another way that it should have occurred. That is, the department heads meet together with their staff and you review anyone's perceptions and you work through to find a solution. That's the path I would have taken. That's the path that I would propose and have proposed. So a meeting has been set so we can sit down and have an internal discussion to try to resolve any open issues. But on its face, it is legally deficient. And that is the reason why, frankly, I think it went to rules, and it should stay there until such time that we have something that's a better, professional, competently prepared work product.
Thank you for that question.
And for you and the CFO, are you all making any changes to the bond plan up for vote tomorrow?
There are some discussions. Jill, you'd like to speak to those?
Sure. There's some discussions about a substitute ordinance that would clarify some of the things that have gotten, I think, been misconstrued about the bond ordinance. So the provisions in the bond ordinance that have gotten the most attention have been the ones related to grants and loans to other entities of government, not-for-profits, cultural institutions. Those provisions have been in many prior bond ordinances that related to capital spending and menu money, and they are in there solely for the flexibility for the aldermen to use their menu money for projects that are not sort of on the menu, that are not the streets and sidewalks and other types of CDOT projects that are typical of what they spend. Some of the aldermen do choose to use their money for grants, for schools, for parks, for museums in their ward. So that's solely there for that. That's been misconstrued as a piggy bank for the city to use for all kinds of things that we have no intention to use. And we've been clear that our intent is to use these bonds for capital improvement. So the language changes are to indicate that those funds could only be used for capital, and that they would be restricted only to the types of grants and things like that they're being referred to will be restricted only to the amount of money that's allocable to the aldermanic menu, which is $75 million. And that the balance of it is really for the CIP, as we have stated in testimony at the Finance Committee meeting and publicly numerous times.
So again, in other words, as we said from the very beginning, this investment is for capital, and so that there is no ambiguity, we fully expect and trust that people understand the value of investing in people and doing that now.
Mayor Johnson, you keep saying that you're investing in people, but the people that I talk to tell me that you're investing in your cronies, that there's waste, fraud, abuse, that there's zero transparency. You haven't even shown a single reporter in this room your Gucci gift closet on the other side of that door. People are very,
just
very
a question.
angry.
Just a question.
I keep getting interrupted. I'm the only one. People are very, very angry about this what they call a payday loan for you and your cronies to blow through. Your single-digit poll numbers.
All right, we need the question.
And the anger and the frustration that people are feeling towards their mistrust of you and the lack of transparency. Are you prepared, and your allies for that matter, in City Council, prepared to lose re-election over this payday loan?
We're going to continue to invest in people.
Thank you.
Well, my follow-up question, is I don't know if you. Okay, so you interrupt my question, you cut my mic. People tell me that that's contributing to your single-digit poll numbers. By the way, you should probably learn a lesson from one-term Lightfoot.
Okay, Mayor.
What percentage of this payday loan will you commit to potholes?
So it's not a payday loan, and the full investment is to improve the infrastructure for the people of Chicago.
Mayor, good morning.
Good morning.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly change the subject. We've seen across the country 2 sanctuary cities within the last 24 hours actually take the step to file a lawsuit against President Trump and the Department of Justice to try to prevent any sort of retaliation for their own welcoming city policies. I'm wondering what your take is on that, considering you're on the other end of a lawsuit from Washington, D.C.
Well, look, our welcoming city ordinance, as well as the complementary state law that the state of Illinois provides, ensures that our local law enforcement shows up in the most transparent and effective way. That we do not want any individuals who are undocumented or otherwise to have breakdown between their ability to communicate with law enforcement. As far as, our status, again, as a 40-year trajectory of being a welcoming city for immigrants from around the globe, whether they are Jewish or Chinese or Polish or Italian, Mexican, we're going to remain a welcoming city and hold to our values. Now, as far as, how cities decide to move, around litigation, that is obviously their prerogative. We have not made any rash decisions around how, we will move. But I will say this one thing for sure, is that I made a promise and a commitment to protect working people. And that's really what this moment requires. Because again, this administration is not just threatening the sensibility of our democracy. They're working to force people to surrender their humanity. And we're not going to do that. As this administration is working to defund public education, defund the HUD, to defund the Department of Justice, laying off public employees. Public employees have long been a pathway for working people to get to the middle class. We know that public employees are overwhelmingly women and people of color, particularly here in Chicago. So I know that's a very broad response, but I just want to make sure that people understand that as a city that has been established by immigrants and migrants who were formerly enslaved to come to this city, to build the diversity of this city. It's the global capital of the world, and we're going to continue to show up in our very best.
And Mayor, a follow-up for you. We've seen other sanctuary cities and mayors, particularly Eric Adams in New York, sort of change his tune regarding sanctuary city policies and become more cooperative. I'm wondering if you, the City of Chicago leaders, have had any sort of negotiations happening with Tom Homan or the federal government in which, a deal might be struck similar to what's happening in New York.
Look, our song of unity won't change because of who's in the White House. And, as I said before, the city of Chicago, the greatest love story, a black Haitian immigrant and a Potawatomi woman established the city. Our birthday is coming up in a week. And again, it's been refuge for individuals who are fleeing war. I mean, we have conservatively 30,000 Ukrainians here in Chicago. No one asked us to surrender our humanity when we opened up our arms for Ukrainian individuals, particularly the vibrant Ukrainian community that we have here in Chicago. We're not going to. This current administration is the tempter at the end of a 40-day fast. We're going to hold to our values.
Hey, Mayor. So one of the things the criticisms, especially during budget season and now this bond proposal, has been a lack of trust between the city council and your office. Do you think that is going to necessitate a change in governance? And I'm thinking of for the bond deal, introducing more guardrails into it. Some are calling for the specific projects to be listed out. Some want a lower amount initially, and if you need more, come back to us later. I know you've been resistant to kind of including those sort of things, but do you think you're going to have to moving forward to get things done?
Well, look, let me just say there are a lot of, people throughout the city of Chicago who work and serve this city. And there are good, hard-working people who serve this city. And there are 50 alders who reflect the diversity of our city, and these are good individuals that I believe have good intention. Our process has been more inclusive and more transparent than any other process. It has been. I've made a commitment to co-governance. There are a number of individuals, of course, who are chairs of committee that did not support my candidacy. I don't know too many other administrations that would have been available for that type of collaboration. As far as how we move forward, the people of Chicago expect me to invest in people. They do. And let me just say this. Here's how confident they are. I had a constituent, and Heather will remember this question. There was a constituent who came to the WTTW open forum, and she said, Mayor, you either fix these streets or fix my car. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to fix the streets. And I know that's what aldermen want. So this process is quite inclusive, but showing up for the people of Chicago is what we are expected to do. And that's what I've done for these first 21 months, and I'll continue to do that throughout my tenure.
On the pension payment from CPS, I know the immediate concern is the 2024 payment, right? But you also passed the 2025 budget with that payment expected. Do you think an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement, should be agreed to before next budget season to ensure that's happening? Because it's obviously
question.
In dispute now.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Look, here's what we know we have to agree on, is that the board has to continue to build a muscle to be its inevitable independent body, right? And these entanglements that have existed over the course of decades in this city, we're working to detangle them. And we're working with the Board of Education to not only develop the muscle, but to demonstrate a real commitment to economic solvency. For too long, administrations have ignored the value of people's retirement. When you think about neighborhoods across this city, let's just talk about 60644. That's the zip code that I live in. It's Austin on the west side of Chicago. Pensioners contribute to our local economy. The average pensioner in the 60644 zip code is about $54,000 a year. $54,000 a year. I mean, we're not talking about people who are retired and are getting rich off their retirement. And so paying into people's retirement and making sure that we make a commitment to public education, that is the point here. I said that I was going to address the structural damage that I inherited, and that's what we're doing. And it's going to save taxpayer dollars, billions of dollars down the line. So it's a muscle that they have to develop, and as a former public school teacher and someone who has coached sports, we're all in this together to develop the type of muscle that will lead to a better, stronger, safer Chicago and a more balanced, inclusive economy.
Good morning, Mayor.
It is a good morning.
To follow up on that, CPS leadership is arguing that it cannot issue debt in order to balance the budget. How would you assuage any concerns from school board members over whether your $242 million borrowing plan might run afoul of their fiduciary duties to balance the budget?
Jill?
Sure. I mean, not surprising, CPS has unique provisions in the school code that are different from any other school. CPS has been singled out over the years and does not have the exact same powers as all other school districts. So all of the school districts have an explicit power to do working capital borrowings, and they don't have the explicit authority to do that in sort of the simplest way possible, like other school districts do. But they are able to do working capital using other financing structures, and they have done it many times before. And so, there is a manner in which they can come up with a plan of finance to do a borrowing if that is fully necessary at the end of the day to meet their obligations to balance their budget.
And Mayor, this March 30th deadline to either persuade the school board on the pension payment or city council on dipping into reserves doesn't seem like, the ideal negotiating situation for you. In hindsight, was there anything your administration could have done differently to avoid this time crunch?
Well, I mean, look, I don't know if any of the situations that I've been under have been ideal, right? When I was sworn in, there were wildfires and smoke coming in from Canada. Unprecedented rainfall, buses coming up from Texas. Like, I didn't sign up for this job to be in an ideal situation. I signed up for this job because I believe in people and I believe in this city. Look, as a former public school teacher as well as a parent, I made a commitment to ensure that our public schools finally address the inequity that has existed in this city for too long. That's why we've been a big proponent of sustainable community schools, giving local control to school communities so that they can come up with provisions and plans and have flexibility in their budget to address the unique needs of those various communities. 77 different neighborhoods in Chicago. We're talking about 34,000 children, families across the city, want small class sizes, social workers and counselors. We have to be able to deal with the trauma that exists in our schools. Right? When war is being prepared for in this country, the United States military sends doctors to hospitals in places like Chicago to prepare them for the type of trauma that they're going to experience during wartime. These are the experiences that our young people are living through day in and day out. This is not just simply about a deadline. This is about a promise. This is about a promise to ensure that every single child in this city has access to a fully funded, well-rounded curriculum school in their neighborhood. That is the ideal situation. That is the ideal situation that we are fighting for. That is the ideal situation that gives people hope, and that's why they continue to send their children to our schools here in Chicago. That is the ideal situation that our teachers are expecting. So this is not just simply about responding to inconvenient circumstances. It's about creating the ideal circumstances so that parents actually feel confident that the education that their child will get will reflect the education that children in certain parts of the city have gotten. That's the ideal situation that we're fighting for, and that's why I'm mayor of this city.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Reaching into the reserves to cover the shortfall created, by the pension payment would likely be concerning to credit rating agencies. Can the city's credit rating afford to take further downgrades, and what efforts are underway to help improve the city's credit rating ahead of next year's budget?
We need progressive revenue. We need sustainable, reliable, progressive revenue. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. What I've repeatedly called for is for our city and our state to come together to ensure that working people are protected. And the way we do that is we have to challenge these large corporations, the ultra rich in this city, in this state, have to do more. Look, working people are darn near tapped out. We just are. We're trying to, not just keep up with mortgage, we're trying to keep up with the cost of living. Every time I look around, my child is asking me to sign them up for yet another activity that costs. And I want my children to have as many activities as possible. But that requires revenue, resource. And so what we're going to continue to do as a practice is to continue to find ways in which we can generate progressive revenue. That's why in Springfield we're working to make sure that the personal property replacement tax, that becomes available again for us. You all know where I stand when it comes to the real estate transfer tax. It's a good idea. And 97% of Chicagoans will receive a tax break. Check this out. 3% of the city of Chicago's tax base that has property that is valued over $1 million, with just an incremental shift, small one, over $1 million and over $1.5 million, we could generate $100 million conservatively to address the critical needs. We're talking about less than 3% of the population can help us generate $100 million yesterday. While the vast majority of working people in this city who do not have property that's valued over $1 million will receive a tax break. So we would give tax breaks to working people, ask the ultra wealthy or those who have a little bit more means to do a little bit more to generate revenue so that we can respond to the housing crisis, that we can respond to the education challenges that we have. So the point that I'm making is that I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing, is responding to the structural damage that I inherited, continue to make investments in our workers, continue to make investments for working people, and then challenge those who have had a little bit more cushion or greater cushion over the course of decades to show up stronger for this city.
And then on Alderman Matt Martin's proposal to amend how the law department interacts with the OIG during investigations, Inspector General Witzberg said her office asked the Corporation Counsel to issue a written legal opinion on these issues, but that the law department declined to do so. Is that the case, and why not weigh in?
Mary?
I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Mariah with W.
Mariah. Let me be clear. There has been no such request, but we will be issuing a full-throated legal opinion on the issues that she surfaced, and we will share it with the Alder Corps, who should be privy to why the thing that she's proposing fails on its face. I wonder if people fully understand, as attorneys, what the obligations are. We have licenses to protect. Simply because she advances an item for our review or prosecution, to suggest that lawyers wouldn't engage in a legal analysis of said product, it's inconsistent with how we exist, how we perform, inconsistent with the attorney-client privilege that we're obligated to uphold. So it's quite serious. It's a complete departure from every head of that office, from my memory. It's a complete departure from an Illinois Supreme Court decision. It reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of the law and of the obligations of that office. But mostly, it would dismantle guardrails so that the person charged with looking at fraud, waste, and abuse would become the abuser. That can't be allowed. The lawyers that are tasked with the work, again, it's not me, I'm the only appointee. These are longstanding lawyers who've just been there to do the work. And if what comes over is deficient, what that means is there is a person that would be prosecuted inappropriately. We can't do that. What that means is a person would request a lawyer, our department, because they had confidential conversations, to be present at an interview, and that wouldn't be allowed. We can't do that. That's inconsistent with how every other federal body operates, and I see them all. No one, no exceptions, has taken that posture. So I have to stand on the rule of law first, with the attorneys that are doing the work second, and against anything that removes guardrails and the protections that every public servant is entitled to. Now, where that public servant has failed and engaged in fraud, waste, and abuse, we're the ones that do the prosecution. But for my lawyers to move forward, the files that are sent over from that body have to have proper evidence. And unfortunately, on occasion, they do not. As a rule, we work beautifully together. It should be a complementary process. But in that instance where someone's rights are not adhered to because there's a desire to prosecute them without evidence, we can't stand with that. We have to send the file back, ask for more evidence, and unless and until they present it, we can't move forward. We've had several recent incidents where that's occurred. Professionally, I'm prohibited from getting into the details because, again, client confidentiality. But we can't act on a file that is deficient in terms of evidentiary matters, or worse, prosecute someone where we don't have adequate basis for it. If someone is, just because someone is a public servant and is asked to go to an interview, if asked and we believe attorney-client privilege is at stake, the city's period interest, we participate. I do that with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I have deputies. It's usually a deputy-level person that participates in those. This is standard practice. So what is being sought here is a departure from 30 years of standard practice, and I stand on the shoulders of every corporation counsel who's come before me who have stood on the principle of law. I also stand beside every OIG that has come before her and stood with the principle of law. As a rule, each of them has found a way to ensure they're able to do their work while we are able to do ours. That is why I set up a meeting for next month so we can sit down and talk through the issues. But yes, I haven't had a separate request for an opinion. We have submitted community letters back to her on specific topics where she's raised to discuss procedural paths. But I hadn't had any replies to those until this moment. So we will respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Last week I asked you about the city's pursuit policy, and you talked a little bit about the consent decree, which will mark its 6th anniversary this weekend. You said that the city had reached full compliance on 16%. I checked with the monitors. It's 9%. After 6 years, is that good enough for the people of Chicago?
It's 16%, and no, that's why we're still working. 88% of the preliminary level is complete. You have to get through each phase in order to be in full compliance. 52% of the secondary phase is complete. No, it's not, but it has jumped drastically since I've been in office. I've been in office for 20 months. It was at 3%. It was at 16%. Now, there's obviously a debate in the number, but the point is we're not at a 100%. Are we moving in the right direction? Yes. Are we moving faster? Yes. Do we still have a long way to go? Yes. All those things are true.
Going back to the bond deal, your office introduced that proposal one day after S&P downgraded the city's credit rating. I've heard CFO Jaworski say that this additional bonding is not going to impact, or you guys don't believe it will impact the city's credit rating. Was that an appropriate decision after the credit rating, or should your administration have taken a step back and reconsidered the borrowing in light of the downgrade?
We're taking a step forward to invest in people. That's the most important thing here. Look, no one is disputing the structural damage that I've inherited, right? Now, within the first 16, 18 months, we had 2 credit upgrades, right? The ebbs and flows of our market are what they are. But here's what is consistent: the needs of the people of Chicago. Look, I have all of our commissioners that are related to the type of investments that we're making. Our Commissioner Carney, Commissioner Connor, Commissioner Hernandez-Tomlin. These are all individuals who are going to show up for the people of Chicago, replacing the lead service, the service lines, right? This is a matter of our health. So, look, I understand that there are some people who are concerned about the market. So am I. But one of the ways in which we can actually stabilize the market is by investing in people and putting people to work. Let's keep this in mind. For every single project, there are jobs attached to this. Jobs for the people who live in this city. That's. I don't want us to lose sight of why we invest in people. And I'm always going to center our people first. And whether you live on the far north side or the far southeast side or anywhere else in between, the infrastructure needs that we have, particularly at a time where we're uncertain on whether or not what we send to D.C. will be returned back to us. I cannot afford to base our investments on whether or not the federal government is going to do its job. And we certainly cannot afford more deferred maintenance. We're going to show up for the people of Chicago, streets, lights, bridges, to ensure that the maximum safety can be experienced and that we can put people to work.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
Wanted to pivot back to immigration just for a moment and questions you could potentially face in front of Congress. There is that potential, obviously, of criticism of Chicago's response to this humanitarian crisis, to the $600 million that it has cost the city, to the recent
$400 million.
Well,
over
400 million.
Over 4 years, $400 million since 2022.
Of the amount of money that the city has shouldered as a result of this, and to recent immigration enforcement efforts. I'm guessing, what is your counterpunch going to be to that?
To our values? Yeah, that's
for
not
the questions
that's
of
not.
Congress.
I mean, I get your question. That's not a counterpunch. That's just who we are. We're a city, again, that was established by a black Haitian immigrant. That is the punch. We're responding to individuals who don't share our values. Look, Governor Abbott, because I know you like to talk about money, Governor Abbott spent $220 million to bus people across this country. That's $1,800 a person. $220 million, and refused to cooperate with us when we worked to bring order and structure to the damage at the border. Do you not know that they were putting people on buses and they were not telling us who was on the bus? I protected Chicago by passing that bus ordinance. We don't know who were on those buses. And they put women and children on those buses, making them susceptible to the type of harm and danger of that people who are vulnerable experience. We responded to an attack and we rose above that attack. Now here's the good news though. As a result of this crisis that Congress left cities alone to deal with. Now, whatever critique people might have, it was unprecedented. Nowhere in the history of America have local municipalities have been asked to stand up resettlement sites. It has never existed. And then here's what we did as a result of it. We built a single system initiative with the state of Illinois to respond to the homeless crisis in America. Do you not know that when people call for 311 looking for shelter, there's now one family that's on the waiting list right now? That has never happened in the history of Chicago. Just last week, 82% of those who needed shelter were unhoused Chicagoans. So not only did we respond emphatically by holding to our values, we actually built a system out of the crisis to respond to a need that no other administration had responded to.
And the follow-up may be germane to you, could be germane to Mary. Speaking of the cost to the city, how did we get out of certain contractual obligations? The money that was spent prepping the lot in Brighton Park, the lease required us to make monthly payments. I've filed multiple FOIA requests trying to get an answer on whatever happened to that. What's their addenda that was filed to sort of get us out of that? Dovetailing to that, what about favorite? There was an extension in September for $100 million that ran through April of this year. We're in a different phase of the migrant crisis now. Are we still obligated to both those contractual obligations?
I think we got
sure.
you. Our chief
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, Christina Pastiani, Vice Chief of Staff. So with respect to favorite, when there are those types of contracts, there are the extensions for an anticipated estimate of what the cost would be if we were functioning at full staffing using favorite. As you know, we've transitioned several of our shelters to community-based contracts, and we actually have an RFP prepared for the remainder of those shelters to continue to have community-based partners provide those services. The contractual obligations with favorite are not to lock in a certain amount. It's usually to be able to pay past expenses up to a certain amount. So that's what you're seeing. And to his point, to the mayor's point, we were again able to take the infrastructure of this emergency operation and transition it to enhance our legacy structure around addressing homelessness and housing and ensuring that not only are we meeting the needs of unhoused Chicagoans, but we are providing additional support capacity building for our community-based organizations to address these needs that are Chicago-based. So what we inherited, we had no control over. We were able to slowly wean them off and make it more not just palatable, but more beneficial, economical, efficient, and then transition it to a Chicago-based practice. So that's the process in which we undertook with this.
And the lease in Brighton Park, were we able to get out of that?
The lease in Brighton Park, I'm going to hand that over to Mary because I believe there's some legal implications with that.
I want to get back with them on that.
We'll get back to you.
Get back with you on that. Thank you for that. Thank you for those questions.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
The Inspector General has argued that the law department treats her office more like a third party and not like an internal organization when it comes to attorney-client privilege. And in that memo a few weeks ago, she argued that the federal government has had to rectify a similar issue. Does the law department believe that her opinion of the access that her office should be afforded
I believe Mary
is
just
reflective
responded
of
to that already. She already responded to that in her 2 questions ago. But if you want to just add that last part about the commitment to both entities within city government.
Sure. Restate your question, please.
If you could just touch on specifically attorney-client privilege. I know you touched on it a little bit more broadly, but she believes that as an internal organization, they should have full access to what would typically be privileged to a third party.
So that's not how a privilege works. They are not the attorneys on the matter. There is one legal authority by statute, by code, by case law. It's the Department of Law. Period. End of story. Attorney-client privilege is sacrosanct and protected by the lawyers who have licenses and must protect it in terms of their community communications. If one is engaged in investigatory work, you don't have access to an attorney's file. That would be in violation of the law. It would put those attorneys in jeopardy. It would frankly give a cause of action to the subject of the investigation. So again, that's why I've invited the conversation to sit down and have a talk about it, because I just think there are some fundamental misunderstandings. But there is one Department of Law. There is no, the thing that was proposed would dilute those authorities and just up in decades of law, and frankly, if there's an ethical consideration, it would be the lawyers assigned to that work. If they did the thing that would be asked of them, it would be inconsistent with their professional duties, with their license obligations, with the lawyers' ethical responsibilities.
And the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, she has mentioned to me that the ordinance that was proposed would bring subpoena enforcement power more in line with what is afforded to COPA and its relationship with the law department. Why should the OIG's subpoena enforcement power be different from COPA's?
So, A, she's not COPA. That office is not COPA. The subpoena authorities, the way it's structured, and this again has been the case for decades, is the subpoena authority, there has to be a checks and balance. So if she requests a subpoena, it comes over to a deputy. Again, I don't make the judgment, goes to a deputy. That deputy has 33 years of experience in litigating. That's the first line of defense. He looks at it to make sure it meets certain legal standards. Why is that? If it failed to meet the legal standards, the finger pointing would not happen back to that office. It's the law department that would be held responsible for having failed to hit those standards, because our obligation would be, to the extent there's something to be pursued later, we'd have an obligation to pursue it, or we would end up having to work in concert with them with respect to anything that they're pursuing from a subpoena standpoint. So ultimately, it is the analysis that we're talking that happens in the law department. Again, this is nothing new, and I take exception to this notion that somehow it's political. These lawyers are public servants. They've been serving the law department for decades. And to suggest that they are making a political calculus is to diminish what they've been doing. They've earned the right and the respect. And I just, on their behalf, I have to say, it is the most inappropriate thing to suggest. They're just trying to do their jobs. What should be happening, and what as a rule does happen, is the two offices work in complementary fashion. For whatever reason, under this source of leadership, there's a departure. That departure has started long before I arrived. But the law didn't change. The obligations of the attorneys didn't change. Just one individual's perspective on how they would go about their charge seems to have changed. It must be consistent with the law. Our attorneys have to be allowed to do their job. If they don't, the city inherits the liability. And that's the work that we do and they do every day. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you again, Mary, for just, emphasizing again the importance of hardworking public employees. I know that at the federal level, the current administration has attacked public employees. I know that there are good, hardworking people in this building who love this city, who are serving this city, and a couple of which I did not acknowledge, so I do apologize. Our Chief Operations Officer, John Robertson, is here. I have two deputy mayors, our Deputy Mayor for Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights, Ponce de Leon, as well as our Deputy Mayor for Community Safety, Gary Gatewood.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
So we know that there are lots of questions about what could happen in Washington and how that funding could affect what comes to Illinois. Governor Pritzker presented a very austere budget. Does that mean the city is now adjusting what its requests are for the legislature? And can you offer a little bit of how you might be adjusting what you'll be asking?
That's pretty good, Shia. Look, as I said before, what the state of Illinois is dealing with, state of Maryland, states across the country, cities across the country are dealing with these deficits, and these are heavy lifts in this moment. So I do want to acknowledge that. And look, we fought hard to secure $426 million from the federal government to respond to the victims of flooding back in 2023. So we're moving full speed ahead to repair the damage in those homes, as well as make sure that individuals who are repairing that damage reflect the neighborhood where the damage occurred. So there is some uncertainty. If I get this right, I believe, Tina, that about 80% of the funding for CDPH is through grants. 85% federal grants, right? So there are some real challenges. I make no mistake about that. And this is why local governments as well as state governments will have to show up in a stronger way. Now, in the city's budget, we did have cuts across the board. And I'm not going to look back at our commissioners because I know I'm going to trigger them in a second. But they worked hard to find the 3%. It was only 3%, right? Correct. Okay, all right. They said only, sure, Mayor, only. They found those efficiencies, and that wasn't easy. And they found them, but we didn't have to lay people off. We didn't have to cut services. In terms of our request, look, our state and its vibrancy is certainly connected to the vibrancy of the city of Chicago, and everybody's in agreement with that. Our requests are not that much different than any other municipalities across this state. We still need more support for special education, for bilingual education, transportation within our public schools. So those requests we're still holding strong to those. Our chief operations officer, part of his portfolio and the 20 plus years of service that he has lended to the city and the county, he has been a part of every single department in the city of Chicago over the course of his time, and we're looking very closely at Chicago Transit Authority and how we can have more equitable funding. Help me out here, COO Robertson. I believe CTA we attribute for what percentage of the overall transportation input into the state?
Over 80%.
Over 80%, but we get what back?
About 40%.
About 40% back, right? So that's an unequitable distribution in terms of our output. And so we want balance and equitable structures that complement who we are as a city. And then, as I've mentioned before, progressive revenue is one that we are still paying attention to. But there are mayors across the state. We're all in agreement that the LGDF structure is woefully underwhelming, right? So we want to see some progress there, and we'll continue to push the General Assembly to help support local municipalities. And then, of course, as I said before, the personal property replacement tax and the telecom tax, just some areas of cleanup that we need to do to ensure that there's revenue available for our cities. The last thing that I'll say to this is working people in the city of Chicago elected a working class man to fight for working class people. And that doesn't change because the circumstances are in flux. We have to remain committed to our overall agenda to repopulate Chicago with working people. Right now, we can conservatively get 400,000 more people in Chicago. Aren't we looking forward to 400,000 more people in the city of Chicago? We are, and that's going to help increase our tax base. It's going to put more people in homes. It's going to make sure that our schools are vibrant with young, smiling, diverse faces across the globe. So in other words, my commitment to working people has not changed. We're going to push to ensure that investments in our city, reflect the output of our city.
Very good. You're getting ready for that March 5th hearing in Washington. Who did you call, or who have you called for advice on how?
Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm calling on the name of Jesus. I mean, there are a number of people. I text Mayor Lightfoot. I texted Mayor Lightfoot a couple of days ago. We had a text with Arnie Duncan. He's had his share of hearings. There are a number of people. I've spoken to Congressman Davis, Congressman Jackson. Those just to name a few. I'm talking to everyone. This is about Chicago. This is not about, Brandon Johnson. I am part of a long legacy of leaders in this city and this state that have stood up for working people. And that's essentially what I'm prepared to do on March 5th, is to stand up for working people. The city of Chicago continues to lead the way. Housing, behavioral health, when it comes to the education system, The way we are showing up in community safety, Deputy Mayor Garen Gatewood can attest to this. We're down 25% in violent crime just this year alone. The month of February, I believe we're up 37% reduction in violent crime as a whole. Since I've been in office, we've seen a reduction in violence every single year that I've been in office. There's been an overall reduction in violence. But we've also have increased our investments in young people, $20 billion of new investments just with Department of Planning and Development. I hope I get this right, John. I believe it's $11 billion just last year, 37,000 construction jobs, almost 10,000 units for new units. Now, that's a little ways to go to get to 400,000, but we have almost 4,000 affordable homes that we've built. The city of Chicago is vibrant and it's strong. Even within these difficult times and the challenges that my administration has faced, there's not one thing that I said that I was going to do and fight for when I ran that I have not addressed. You're welcome.
Hello, Mayor.
Hello.
A point of privilege. I don't need 400,000 extra people. It's going to make my commute even worse.
All right. So it won't be extra people, by the way. Now, if we get over 400,000, then come and see me.
So I did want to also just ask you about your trip to D.C. next week. One might observe that these press conferences will be rather tame compared to the questioning that you are going to get from these members of Congress, and particularly the Republicans. How are you preparing for that, and do you expect that you'll be able to actually convey the message that you're going there to give?
Well, on Sundays, I usually sit down with my wife and children. We just have a reflection of the week. This week, they behaved as the Republican Party, and were taking me through a series of questions in preparation for this hearing. Look, in all seriousness, our country is under attack from within our country. There are individuals that are playing on people's fears and living in this hyperbolic space that, quite frankly, is not healthy. And it's unfortunate that we have an administration that is as incorrigible as it is. But we're going to hold to our values. And whether or not we can, get our message across in that particular room doesn't mean that I'm going to stop delivering the message of hope, inspiring young people, making sure that working people know that they have a fighter and a champion in their mayor. There's no other mayor that has released the amount of TIF dollars back into our taxing bodies. We have more young black men registering for college. We have a diverse makeup, of which the last I checked, 65% of this administration were women. We have families, whether you're in Andersonville, or Bronzeville, who want better quality services. That's why this investment that we're making for infrastructure is important. It's why I'm not backing down. And I've never backed down in a fight. One of the toughest, days that I've ever had as a public servant is when I was teaching at Jenner Academy in Cabrini Green, and the students were, acting out on their trauma. And by the time I got the room to quiet down, one of my students raised her hand and said, "Mr. Johnson, you shouldn't be teaching here. You should be teaching at a good school." Because for so long in this city, working people have been abandoned. You have young people who don't believe that they deserve value. I'm changing that. People are valued in this city, and especially working people. And I don't care which congressperson believes in that or not. It doesn't sway my belief that there are good, decent people in this city and across America who deserve their government to show up for them. And March 5th or any other day, I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up for the people of Chicago as I've always done. And I can't say I'm looking forward to it, but I will certainly say that when I get there, who I am is who I will remain.
Do you expect, with Mayor Adams sort of changing his tune towards the Trump administration, some might believe, and I wonder if you would concur with this, that you are going to be the main target of their questioning, and you'll be the one that really has the target on your back. Has your team sort of prepared you for that, and do you expect that's what's going to happen?
I don't know, honestly, what to expect there. I will just say is I will be prepared to defend working people in this city. That's it, that's all. That when it comes to our delivery of government, when it comes to our commitment to government workers, when it comes to our commitment to this democracy, that's the beauty of Chicago, that we have faced many challenges over the course of, I should know this, I believe we turned 188 on March 4th. Whether it's Chicago fire, you know, the voices of the unheard at the time in which Dr. King was assassinated, whether it's the Black Panther Party that fought for health clinics, to the establishment of this global capital of the world, that whether I am singled out or not, just like Chicago rebuilt itself after the fire, just like Chicago, as we have responded to mass school closings, just like Chicago has responded to the closing of mental health clinics, the destruction of public housing, look at what my administration is doing. Social green housing, creating a public apparatus to build more affordable units, investing in our young people when outlets have tried to demonize them. We have invested in them. When people said that our schools could not have everything that it deserves, I didn't back down. And that's who we are as Chicago. We're grit, we're strong, we're tenacious, we're emphatic. We eat our hot dogs a certain way. It's just who we are. And Chicago style will remain and continue to strengthen over the course of my time as mayor. I appreciate y'all. Thank you all.